Hillary Clinton gets over $1 billion to run a race, presidential race. The person she's running against hasn't run a political race because he's not a politician. He's a reality show host. And based on what the New York Times is saying, and what at the very least Libs have been believing, he got into the race entirely to boost his fortunes because his brand was Trump. And his brand was success, despite the fact he was a magnificent failure throughout the course of his life, and used that failure to his advantage to some degree in regards to just not paying taxes. The key point here, though, is that guy who wasn't a politician, who had no political acumen, gets into a presidential race against the most established politician in the history of the establishment of politicians and beats the stuffing out of her. Clinton had over $1 billion. She had all of the media coverage in the world that was favorable to her. She had people attacking Donald Trump left and right. And she also had Huffington Post saying that her chances of winning was, 98% chance of winning on the night she lost. Watching Hillary supporters weep, cry, not understanding what took place. What happened? All of my propaganda outlets told me that we were going to win this thing handedly. They missed the point that sometimes polls are used to direct. Polls aren't necessarily always used to inform. And in that very specific case, they were in a bubble talking to themselves. So, of course, with $1 billion to run a campaign, with all of the media attention, with all of the people basically saying that this person is going to win, that the other person is unconscionable, that there's no way that America could choose that other person, and she loses. And of course, who does she blame? Comey, Trump, Comey, Sanders, Russia, Jill Stein, Republicans, lefties, blacks being insufficiently loyal, hashtag insufficiently obedient. Everybody except for the person who's running the race, Hillary Clinton. It's as if she forgot that the race itself was an actual political contest where the goal was to get votes. And in the goal being to get votes, she looked at it like it was a coronation. She forgot that the point was to win and get votes. Now, you can make an argument and say, well, wait a minute, she got 3 million more votes. I will say all of those votes came from California. And if you take California off the map, she got a mud hole stumped in her. And even if you put California back on the map, did she not know we were running in an electoral college? Libs, unable to grasp the fact that they lost, and beyond being able to grasp the fact that they lost, bitter, hateful, sewer-dwelling, just cretins, not able to accept the responsibility of failure. It's all your fault. It's all on you. It's nobody else. You can try to blame all of these other groups. You can try to blame Susan Sarandon, Jill Stein, none of that stuff. One person was running in that race, and it was Hillary Clinton. And all of the other Democrats behind her and everything else backed her. You could have pushed her to be more aggressive in regards to policy that the public wanted. For example, Sanders didn't seem to have the problem of getting those crowds. And the very people that she needed were the very people that Sanders was able to bring. The catch here, though, is more of Sanders supporters fell in line and backed her than Clinton supporters backed Obama. But they did. Clinton even lost a share of Obama voters, though. I mean, 10-15% of Sanders voters didn't vote for her? And then there was a percentage of Obama voters or people who voted for Obama that didn't vote for her? I guess the point I'm making here, though, is all of that is irrelevant. She lost her job, get votes. She didn't get the votes necessary to win. All her failure. And the Democrats who didn't push her to be more aggressive in regards to expansive policies. Now, I'm trying to drill this point in that it is nobody else's responsibility. Philosophically, and honestly, what it should be, the job of a candidate is to go out. What does the public require? And provide those things. Meaning, if there needs to be jobs or job program, you need to get policy to that. If you're in the middle of a pandemic with 30 million people out of work and 40 million people without health care, you should probably provide for the health care. I'm making the point to you that your job as a candidate is to tend to material and conceptual needs of your population. And if you are not doing that, you shouldn't get their votes. Here's the rub. You're in a two-party system, and neither candidate does it. What a scam that you got going there. The fact that neither does it, they work to their own interests and to their own constituencies. And those constituencies tend to be people of means, because those are the people that are dropping money into their pockets and G-strings. The catch here, though, is in attending to the needs of a very small number of human beings, the public is left alienated from the political process and gets angry, especially when the public feels it's been screwed over or it's been had. Obama ran on hope and change and did not deliver whatever that hope and change meant to the individuals who were in the society itself. And those people were still hungry and craving for change. Those people, Pied Piper Trump, that Hillary Clinton played up, those people could not bear another status quo candidate. And even though they thought Trump was incompetent the day they gave him the presidency, they still indeed gave him the presidency. That wasn't an issue of magic. You cheated Sanders, which alienated a lot of people in that sense. But beyond that, Hillary Clinton was that most hated, awkward candidate in the history of candidates. Up until the point Trump came onto the scene from the standpoint of them disliking him more. But she was a flawed candidate from jump. The woman was running with a criminal investigation over her head where she could have been perp-walked. Put it in perspective. Whose fault? Her fault. Whose fault? Democrats' fault. If the Democratic Party really wanted to bring the party together in this kind of organic faction, they would have supported Medicare for all. They would have supported ending student debt. And you would have had all the people that you needed galvanized and backing you in order to win. You didn't do that. And because you didn't do that, you lost. It's very straightforward. Now, from the standpoint of now, well, failure has consequences. Not being willing to organically bring the party together has consequences. One of those consequences of losing is that you don't get the ability to set the direction. And so because Barack Obama was so cavalier and so too cool for school about Merrick Garland getting over the finish line, Merrick Garland didn't get over the finish line. Merrick Garland is sitting fucking home somewhere. Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and now the new one, Barrett, will be on that bench. And there are radical consequences for that, for either Roe v. Wade, for either Obamacare, and even for the 2020 election itself, if she's sitting on the bench when this election goes to the elections to the Supreme Court. Whose fault? Your fault. Whose fault? Democrats' fault for not pushing Clinton to accept those policies. No, you wanted to be badasses, and your badasses got kicked. In this very specific instance, the whole point of the political space, philosophically again, what does the public need? Supply the material needs of the public, get those votes, and win. And just like Clinton, Biden is doing the same thing, believing that because Trump is in office, now the situation is different, that you can batter and get people so terrified that their cowardice takes over, and basically they do a rerun of 2016, but this time Biden wins. A dumber version of Clinton. Those votes that people make are not owed to anybody. The notion that Joe Biden will say, you're not black if you don't vote for him, fuck you. That's obscene. The left is complicit in this because the left basically accepts the argument that it is not the candidate's responsibility to get the votes, that it is indeed the person's responsibility to throw themselves at the candidate. How bizarre and weird that is. Libs even take it to the level that if you're not in the Democratic Party, you, for whatever reason, still should vote Democrat. Isn't that profound? If you were in some other country, that would be hair-raisingly stupid. And yet, that's what they believe. And so they believe all of Jill Stein voters would have voted for Clinton, which is nonsense. They just wouldn't have voted. All of Gary Johnson's voters, who are basically Republicans, should have voted for Clinton. I'm making a point of how stupid this is. And yet, this is what they say. And they will say it openly because when they're talking to each other, it's shorthand. It makes sense. When you're talking to somebody else who's not a Democrat, they think you've lost your mind. It is not the responsibility of the individual to put the candidate in office. It is the responsibility of the candidate to get the votes of the individual by doing things that the candidate will say, yes, this precious thing of a vote, I will give it to you, sir, because I believe you're going to do X or Y. Now, often the candidates basically lie. And so even that process is a little dicey because you can say what you want to say, but the candidate may not believe it. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been lying for the last 40, 50 years. And yet, there he is. He would tell you, I'm an honest guy. Joe Biden is a goddamn liar. Whether it's a civil rights issue, whether it's a South Africa issue, whether it's the Social Security issue, you can go down the list. His education, all of that stuff. Radically lying, plagiarizing speeches, even in his plans right now. Measures that minute, some of that stuff was plagiarized. But Democrats don't see that as a problem. Just like they didn't see Hillary Clinton as a problem. And when you would point out her flaws, they would try to, nope, nothing to see here. Including Bill Maher. Bill Maher is going to say something radically disgusting. And this continues this war with reality of these weirdo Democrats that believe that, A, they don't believe in democracy because they don't necessarily believe in representative government. Clearly they can't if you're telling other people to get out the race. And beyond that point, whatever they believe, this idea that it is somebody else's responsibility to get their candidate in office. I don't know why they believe that. Bitter enders, hurt feelings, and yeah, failure that you, Bill Maher, need to own. But instead of him owning that failure, listen to this. Listen to how disgusting this is.
The Supreme Court hears oral arguments to overturn Obamacare on November 10th. Once this new justice is seated, Obamacare is likely gone. And after that, Roe versus Wade. So I hope you enjoy carrying your rape baby to term. You can name it Jill Stein.
I hope you enjoy carrying your rape baby to term. You can call it Jill Stein. Not only is he chest thumping about somebody being raped, which is in and of itself disgusting. To call it Jill Stein as if Jill Stein has something to do with it. Look, you are a smug, vindictive, not that bright asshole that just having a mouth of saying stupid shit gets you applause. And yeah, you may have an audience that applauds that, but so what? That doesn't necessarily mean anything just because you get applause. There's a reality to the things that you're saying. And the reality to it is you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And this notion that Jill Stein is supposed to somehow cater to Clinton is obscene. It's obscene. I'm sorry, it's obscene. None of this makes sense. The very clear thing, straightforward, clear, that what you should have learned out of this is that what you need to do on your platform is to push your candidate to do things that are popular. If you want to run a race, do that. Hillary Clinton failed for the exact same reason that Joe Biden, if he loses, will fail. Because he's going through this race as if it's a coronation. As if people are supposed to throw them their votes. And that's not how that works. Yes, you can get a situation where because neither candidate represents the interests of the public and neither candidate is really working for any good ends, it's only working for the ends of their constituents, the people who are putting money in their pockets, that the public doesn't necessarily have a place to go. In those situations, my argument is the public should stand on the side of policy, extricate themselves from that space. Now, you will say that's obscene, but you are sitting in a completely different space where you can give $1 million to Obama. Most people aren't. The majority of the people that left the political space were people of color or people who were poor, Democratic constituencies. Why did they leave? They left because they realized that their material interest wasn't being concerned or wasn't taken into concern in regards to the political space. They understood that money was the thing that dominated the political space, and as such, their voting didn't all that much matter into their life. Now, whose fault is that? It's not their fault. It's the party's fault that's supposed to be able to galvanize those people to get their votes. Those people left, extricated themselves from the Democratic Party, alienated and dejected. But you're going to get on here and say the problem here is the voters, not the candidates whose literal job is to get those voters. You're utterly insane. And I'm sorry, it is a deranged point of view. Whether it's the point of view from the standpoint of the Democrats and Libs who say stupid shit like this, or from the lefties that accepts the position. It's almost like a slave not knowing anything else. And the master basically makes an argument of why the slave should be a slave, and the slave says, yes, I agree. How else can I see this? You have a Democratic Party that says stupid shit like this. You have lefties, progressives, who are in the Democratic Party that would agree with us. And I mean agree in a flesh-to-bone way. And by agree, I just mean that when Democrats make an argument that basically we own your vote, lefties will say, no, man, like Cenk Uygur, like, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But when it comes down to it, brass tacks, they drop to their knees so fast. Instant. Not understanding that if your objective is to get policy accomplished, you stand on the banner of policy and the party matters less. That means what you're focusing on and everything else, the arguments that you make. Is the Democratic Party willing to tank it to a man that they call a maniac, the end of all things, in lieu or instead of backing policy that will organically bring the country together, like Medicare for all? I mean, for fuck's sake, you're in a pandemic. I shouldn't even have to make that argument. I'm making the very basic point, though, that what Bill Maher should have been doing, what Uygur and all these other people should have been doing, was screaming to the hilt that you are going to lose if you don't organically bring together the party. And you do that through policy. It's not magic. Hillary Clinton lost because Hillary Clinton wasn't back in the interest of the public in regards to what the public wanted. Whether Joe Biden wins or loses, Joe Biden may be able to get the public over a barrel where they're so terrified that they put him in office. But the same thing is true of Biden. Represent the interests of the public, you get their votes. It's not magic. The people that Sanders was able to bring together are the very people that these guys need to get in office and the very people Clinton needed to get in office. She didn't want to represent their interests. She didn't want to push for Medicare for all. Biden doesn't want to push for Medicare for all. She didn't want to push for the elimination of all student debt. She didn't want to, expand Social Security. I'm making the point that this is not magic. Represent the public's interests, and you will get the public's vote. Joe Biden and his constituency, honestly, wouldn't lose anything from the standpoint of people who are backing him to back Medicare for all. He would only increase his numbers. What he would lose are some of his donors, the billionaires, the 100 billionaires that are out there that are backing Joe Biden. That's what he'd lose. That's where the consternation would be. When the Washington Post makes the point that Wall Street was talking to Joe Biden's people and they were concerned with some of the ideas that he was putting out there. And the people's like, look, don't worry about that. We're just saying that for the Warren crowd. That's all. And that task force, those are just suggestions. He wasn't running on policy. He understood that 70% of the people backing him were doing so because they were terrified of Trump, which means Biden has a free hand. He can do whatever he wants. Ultimately, those people are so terrified and whipped that he can even reach out to Republicans to try to supplement some of them, to pull them in, realizing fully that if indeed you were going to try to pull in a Republican constituency, the Romney Republicans, then your policies would also have to be in line to some degree with those Romney Republicans in order to keep those Romney Republicans. What does that mean from the standpoint of the left? What it means is that their policies from the standpoint of the Democratic Party are more in line with these Romney Republicans than they are with you. They hate and revile you. And if you don't believe that, go and look back at the primaries. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, during the primary process, they were willing to tank it to Trump in order to stop Sanders. And all of them who came on says, yes, we will absolutely go to or rip it from Sanders' hands if we get the opportunity. All of them know that means that they're going to lose to Sanders. I'm making the point to you that they may tell you you have nowhere else to go, and you accept you have nowhere else to go. They don't. This is a wealth differential, I agree. By the same token, you will always be cowed and always under a barrel. It's not me saying, rah, rah, Trump, any more than it was people saying, rah, rah, Trump back in 2016. What people are saying is that you are in the middle of multiple crises and you don't seem to care. And in the grand scheme of things, back in the old days, when there was a crisis, you had an opportunity for these guys to do what they need to do to get across to the public that I am the guy to solve this. The public is an afterthought in this election, despite the fact you have 30 million people out of a job. All of these people at food banks, and not to mention 200,000 people dead. The American public is an afterthought. And so my point here and in 2016 was it's not so much that I'm pushing for one person to win or lose. What I am pushing for is that it is philosophically true and radically necessary for the public to take a perspective that if you want my vote, you represent my interests. It is very clear. That is not the way they do politics. They invert the political space where it is all of a sudden people's responsibility to get their random other people elected. That's not how it works. If you want the votes of the individuals in your party, if you want to ensure that you win this election, not like the way you failed miserably in the last election, it is very straightforward. Represent the interests of the public. All of you, Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, come out saying, yes, if we win, we will implement Medicare for all. Yes, we will do that. Come on, we will get rid of all student debt. We will expand Social Security. Pick three. And I'm saying this from the standpoint of somebody who wants to actually win. You've lost 3 Supreme Court seats out of laziness and incompetence. If you want Biden to win, it's for this joke man and his friends to push him to back policies that are popular. If not, shut the fuck up about Jill Stein. Meaning, if you're not going to do something to get your guy, to ensure that your guys win, don't complain to me after. Libs don't like to necessarily own up to the failures. But in this very specific case, this failure was all and entirely yours. It wasn't Susan Sarandon. It wasn't Jill Stein. It wasn't Comey. It wasn't the Russians. It wasn't Sanders. It wasn't Republicans. It wasn't lefties. It wasn't blacks that were insufficiently loyal. It was none of that. You, your party, failed miserably because you didn't want to represent the interests of the public. Fine. 2020, you get a redo. Do you realize that the Democratic Party used to hold the House of Representatives for like 50 years? Almost uninterrupted. And then you ask, well, what happened? Bill Clinton happened. New Deal politics happened. Or let's say third way politics happened. This triangulation nonsense. And they basically told the left, told the lefties, you have nowhere else to go. So shut the fuck up, sit in the corner. And lefties said, okay. And they obeyed. And they obeyed for 40, 50 years. And they've obeyed for so long that it's almost as if they look for the back door. It's the mule that was broken, or the cow, the horse that was broken, and stands there in the rain, in the snow, unchained, but doesn't realize that it's unchained. And so it just stands there, broken and old. That's what the progressive left looks like to me. Broken and old. For whatever feistiness that is usually there when they're talking about politics, it is utter sham. Your responsibility at this point was not to bend your knees, to fall to your knees, or to go face down and ass up. That was not your responsibility. And I'm talking about from a philosophical or even from a cosmic sense. You win the argument. A host of them. You win the argument. Social Security expansion, healthcare, the Medicare for all thing, the expansion of college, $15 minimum wage, down the line, increasing taxes on the rich, Green New Deal. You won the policy argument. And instead of using that, saying, this is what America wants, especially now that we're in a pandemic, meaning every last one of those lefty groups, every last one of those lefty commentators should be screaming at the height of their lungs, this is what America wants. And you won't get our votes until you acquiesce. And we're doing this for America itself. We're goddamn patriots because nobody else will. And you make the argument that you're in the middle of a pandemic. You have 30 million people out of a job. That the point of this election needs to be dealing with these tangible issues and dealing with the population. And unless you want to win, you will do that. Or you will lose. You get every last one of those lefties that wanted Medicare for all in place, 20, 30, 40 million people saying, yeah, I agree with that. That's right. This is what the public needs, not just wants. It is ethical, the moral choice at this point to follow through with these things. Even if it's just one or two, like a Medicare for all thing, it is necessary. And you stick to that. And you make a demand. And the Democratic Party has a choice. Do you want to tank it to a man that you call the apocalypse, or do you want to acquiesce to the policies that the overwhelming majority of the public supports? We are not the purists here. The purists are the other party, the Democrats. Think of what I'm saying here. You have an overwhelming majority of the public that backs most of these policies. And instead of appropriating the policy to ensure that they beat Donald Trump, they say no. And they are to the right of the policies that American public wants. The only way that works is through cowardice. Just telling you. You appropriating power in this situation is to stand in solidarity with the other members of the society that agree with you and stand out the political space while, ironically, being in a political space, just not theirs. And you're basically saying you get our vote when you represent our interests. And our is the collective interest of America itself. It's a demand. It's the public giving a clear demand to its political space that it is sick and tired of them fucking around. And in giving that demand to the political space, they acquiesce or not. If the Democratic Party is not willing to appropriate policy that has 88% Democratic support and 70% support among everyone else, in the midst of a pandemic, with 30 million people out of a job and with 30, 40 million people out of health care, that's on them. It hurts everybody. But the loss, just like in 2016, will be on them. They are making a conscious choice not to appropriate policy that the American public wants. So why should the American public back a party that is not willing to do that? Now, you can make a case to say the Republicans are the same, but my point is Democrats are the ones that are supposed to care about these particular issues. So I don't give a shit what Republicans do. I'm talking about them. Do you want to win or not? That's where the public needs to be. And if the party is willing to tank it to a man they're calling a fascist and end of all things, as opposed to accepting Medicare for all that has 88% support among that party member and 70% among the public, what does that mean? That is something you need to deal with. What does it mean when the Democratic Party, the party that you back, when it's given a clear demand in regards to this is what the public wants, and you give the point, this is the percentages around these things. Why are you not willing to support the public interest? And are you really willing to tank it to a man you're calling the apocalypse? If they tank it and they make the point we're not going to be demanded to, and with the real reason that they will probably tank it, it would have more to do with the precedent. We don't want the precedent set where the public issues us a demand and gives us an ultimatum. So yeah, we're going to tank it. Nancy Pelosi has $100 billion in the bank. That's not going to be all that much adversely affected. And you need to reconcile that. What does it mean when they do that? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean for the whole notion of representative government? What does it mean, even from the standpoint of a democracy? If your parties are basically willing to tank it to one another in order to not acquiesce to the policies that the public is demanding, you got to reconcile that. You got to deal with that. This is not rah-rah Trump. Damn sure not rah-rah Biden. But it is making the point that if you are a lefty, if you're a Bill Maher, if you're a Democrat, and you want Joe Biden to win, then your argument needs to be you need to support policies that will bring the country together. And the policies you're putting out are basically Clinton do-over. That's what you need to be. Medicare for all doesn't hurt Bill Maher. And since 88% of Democrats supported it, that 88% should be screaming that. The 70-some% that support the Social Security, they should be screaming that. I'm making the point to you that if you want to win, you need to start pushing your candidate to appropriate those policies in the same way that the lefties who are outside of the party saying you need to appropriate these policies. That is the way to win. That is the way to organize your energies in a way that can bring your party together in order to accede to the White House. Whining about Jill Stein is stupidity on stilts. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.